Morning everybody, my name is Russell Hawkes at Clive Emerson Land and Property Auctioneers. I'm one of the senior auction appraisers and I'm based in the office in Chelmsford in Essex. Now, thank you for tuning in. This is my video blog. All the auction appraisers across the company contribute towards a blog on our website at cliveemerson.co.uk. I did one earlier in the year and it's my turn this time, and I thought we'll change it. We'll do a video blog and a video blog interview. So we're going to pop into the next room. There I'm going to be speaking with a property professional about short-term leases. So let's go and see what he's got to say. Today I'm joined on this blog with Chris Baker, who's the managing director and owner of McDowalls Surveyors in East London, an area that I hold deep in my heart. I've known McDowalls for pretty much all of my working career, and I have an association with McDowalls, and I'd like to thank Chris for joining me. And as things all good, Chris?
Yeah, things are really good. Thanks very much, Russ. The firm's been incredibly busy over the last couple of years. We've seen the market rise and now potentially fall a little bit, but interesting times ahead. And what we're talking about this morning on lease extensions, with something that we're really busy on at the moment. A lot of activity on this, whether it be on the auction side, sales side, or management. There's a lot going on this topic at the moment.
Well, look, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I asked you onto this video blog, because as much as anybody about lease extensions, and in particular short leases. So we'll kick off with the first question. Over the last couple of years, I've been asked to assess lots and lots of flats that have got short leases, and I think there's some confusion about what a short lease is. So what I wanted to ask you was, in your professional opinion as a surveyor, what does categorically constitute a short lease, and what impact do you think that will have over, what impact do you think that will have for a leaseholder that's got a short lease on their ability to bring it to the market and sell?
Okay, well, traditionally, when we consider a short lease, it's a lease with a term less than 80 years remaining. What we're finding, though, is that has hit the leasehold reforms hit a lot of headlines over the last 2 years. There's been a lot of chatter about reforming how the valuation works and the process and so on and so forth. And we haven't really seen an awful lot of headway there, beyond the fact that in 30th of June this year, you can no longer charge a ground rent going forward on a new lease. So we've seen that small change, but people's awareness of lease length has become much more to the forefront. So particularly in terms of when you're buying or selling a property, we're finding that if you've got a lease term above 82 years, then you still have enough time to serve the statutory notice, complete the lease extension before it drops below 80 years. So whilst 80 years is the definition between long lease and short lease, when you're buying and selling, you need that awareness of the fact, right, I'm going to buy this flat, it's got a lease term of 81 years. Well, because the statutory period is that you have to have owned the flat for 2 years before you have the right to a statutory extension, that would take you below 80 years. So you immediately find yourself, well, I've bought it above 81 years, but because I have to hold it for 2 years, I'm below 80 years by the time I can legally do my lease extension. So just an awareness that if you're buying a flat, you want to make sure that you complete that purchase and have enough time to have owned it for 2 years before the lease drops below 80. So where you're seeing that sort of question being raised is typically where you've got a lease length, it's 81 years or something like just above the 80-year mark. And that's where I think we're finding a lot of confusion about it.
Well, yesterday, and this is a live example, I got asked to assess a flat yesterday, and the estate agent called me and said, we've been trying to sell this flat for months and we can't sell it. It's 55 years left on the lease. They had already agreed a figure with the freeholder in terms of a lease extension, but they haven't served any notice. It was just a verbal agreement. So
the question that they wanted to ask me was, do we go forward on that basis in the knowledge that we've already got a figure agreed, and if we sell it to a party, then they can just pick up negotiations from the freeholder, or shall we serve a section notice on the freeholder on that basis that we've already agreed a figure? So I said, I don't see why you would need to serve notice. I just wondered what would your opinion be as talking to the seller?
Yeah, you need to be a little bit. It depends a little bit on who the freeholder is, but you've got to be aware that even though you may have verbally agreed something between the two parties, that doesn't constitute a binding contract. So what you find is that you and I could agree a lease extension between ourselves today, and that would be, and then say you then go ahead and sell your property and the buyer picks it up, and that might be perfectly fine between the two of us. But if I decide, oh, I'm going to change my mind, and me and Russell, why we agree this, I think the price has gone up a bit, I think we should be paying a bit more for the lease extension, the lease is a bit shorter, it's taken a long time to sell, all of these things, the two parties can back out, and move away from it. With the section 42, it does sort of crystallize a couple of things. It crystallizes the date of valuation. So if you serve a notice as at the 1st of October, then it's valid at the 1st of October. So if it then takes 2 months to sell, so be it, kind of thing. It doesn't matter. The lease extension side of it, you're valuing at the 1st of October. So that's useful. And of course, the terms on which you end up agreeing under the statute, you know what you're asking for. You're asking for a 90-year extension at a nil ground rent. What you and I may agree could be any variation that we like within reason. We just can't have a ground rent payable. So we could agree a lease for 20 years, which wouldn't necessarily solve the problem that your buyer would potentially have. So I think that it's always useful to have something formal in place so that the buyer can rely on the fact, all right, the notice has been served. I don't have to wait the required 2 years before I can action my lease extension. I can sort of put myself into the vendor's shoes and take it forward from there instead. I think that's more helpful.
I mean, that's the answer, isn't it, really? I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Get your notice served, basically.
Yeah. I think that there's certainly no harm in doing it. I think it does it stops the clock in terms of valuation, but then it starts a process. So, you can always withdraw the notice, and as long as you haven't gone too far through it, the costs that you're facing are quite limited. Yes, it does.
While we're talking about that, what sort of timescales are we talking about? How long would it normally take from start to finish?
It depends a bit on the parties. Typically, lease extensions occur when there's a change in the vendor's circumstances. So it tends to be, I need to move house because of X, Y, Z, and all the reasons we buy and sell. All of those apply. But doing a lease extension from start to finish, even with agreed terms between the two parties, you're probably looking at, broadly speaking, 3 to 4 months, I would say, in a relatively straightforward process. The shorter the lease extension is, there tends to be more arguments because the size of the premium is that much bigger. So what you find then is that if you've got a larger premium, then it tends to be argued about more because the amount of money involved is higher. So that can drag out the process. You might be looking at 6 months for that. But if you end up having to go to tribunal, then you could be looking at 8-10 months by the time, if your poles apart and there's no sort of negotiations going between the two parties, then it can take a long time to resolve this kind of thing.
Quite a lengthy process then.
Yeah, typically, I would say probably 95% of the lease extensions we deal with in any 1 year tend to be agreed without actually making progress towards a tribunal. I would say the number that go to tribunal is pretty small. But it's just something that you can be aware of. The last thing you really want is to agree a sale at a price and then find out you haven't sort your lease extension out, which can take months, and this slows your sale right down.
Well, that brings, I'll talk about leasehold reform. So we did speak briefly earlier about leasehold reform. So just to crystallise, to coin your phrase, to crystallise it, just to clarify, the Leasehold Reform Act that came into effect on the 30th of June this year. I did ask you earlier what impact you think that'll have on the immediate future, and you gave me a really, really good answer. But I think sort of condense that a little bit, and maybe just in your opinion, how do you think it's going to go on from here? Everything that's happened.
So the reform legislation this year was about whether or not ground rents could continue being charged, and the government have basically banned ground rents going forward. So if you're doing a lease extension, or you're buying a brand new property with a brand new lease, then there won't be any ground rent payable. Okay. The old leases with ground rent still in them continue. Okay, they're not outlawed, or there's no issue with those. But when those leases become extended, there won't be any ground rent charged after the extension takes place. Okay. So that's been quite a key change in terms of what the benefit, in terms of the way ground rents work going forward. But what we're finding at the moment is there's not a great deal of difference in the premium payable that you're going to find under what they're proposing for going forward. So the main key proposal is no ground rent, and the lease term, instead of being 90-year extension to the existing term, will be a 990-year extension to the existing term. So what you'll find is the lease length grows astronomically, but the premium that you're going to pay in terms of real money difference at the moment is going to be very small. It's probably going to be around sort of £500 extra to get a 990-year lease over a 90-year extension. So that's going to be one of the key things that we see going forward. But the reforms don't make a massive difference in terms of premium above 80 years. They will make a significant difference on leases below 80 years. Because one of the reforms they're talking about at the moment removes what they call a marriage value element of the valuation. And that will potentially save lessees around 30% of the costs they were facing, and actually reduce that, take that element and strip it out completely. So you could find, when the new reforms actually come through, and there's no time scale for this at the moment, that lease extensions should be quicker, easier and cheaper as a result of the reforms. And that's what the government set out as their key aim.
So lots going to be happening in the leasehold world in the next few years or longer.
Yes, potentially. We've been talking about it for probably 2 or 3 years already, and then obviously we've had COVID and bits and pieces in the middle. It'll be interesting to see what, we've got a new Prime Minister this week, and see what reforms actually come out and who's going to be taking forward those reforms, what their appetite is for, to take forward and legislate this, rather than it just become a set of recommendations. It needs to become law, but we haven't really got a timescale for that.
Well, there you go, guys. Thanks, Chris, very much for talking to me today regarding that. I know there's still a lot of questions people want to ask, but if there's anybody out there that wants to pick up the phone, give us a call, or drop us an email if you've got any comments, or if there's anything you're unsure about. If you've got a flat with a short lease, then get in touch. Go to our website, cliveempson.co.uk. Again, thanks, Chris. Thanks so much for coming on and having a chat with us today. Hopefully we might have another video blog with another property professional. Might have Chris back again talking about something else, and hopefully see you very soon in the near future.
Well, thanks again to Chris Baker, a very knowledgeable guy, an expert in his field. So I'm really pleased that he contributed to the content for the video blog. Now, I'm pretty sure there's going to be quite a few property professionals watching this video. If you are one of those and you'd like to get involved, perhaps you'd like to contribute to a future video blog, then just drop me an email, russell.hawkes@cliveempson.co.uk. You can get my contact details from our website, cliveempson.co.uk. And I look forward to the next video blog.